It is 4:31 PM, and I'm calling this meeting of the Design Review and Preservation Board to order. Will the recording secretary please call roll?
Board Member Anderson. Board Member Ennis.
Here.
Board Member Fagent.
Here.
Board Member Weigel.
Here.
Vice Chair Sharon.
Here.
And Chair James Carter.
Here.
Let the record reflect that all board members are present.
Welcome, everyone. I'd like to make an announcement. If you would like to speak on item 9.1, there are orange cards at the top of the podium. And if you complete one of those cards and drop it in this little box down here, that would really help us. Yes, you can, but thank you. Item 2, we have none. Item 3, approval of minutes. Does anyone have any changes to the minutes from August 21st? Seeing none, the minutes of August 21st are approved as submitted. Recording secretary, do we have any public comment on item 3?
If you are in chambers and wish to make a comment on item 3, approval of minutes, please make your way to the podium and state your name for the record. You will have up to 3 minutes for your comment, and a countdown timer will alert you at the conclusion of that period. Looks like we do have someone at the podium.
Thank you. I'd like to close public comment. Item 4, public comment. This is the time when any person may address matters not listed on this agenda, but which are within the subject matter of the jurisdiction. The public may comment on agenda items when the item is called. Each speaker is allowed 3 minutes. Recording secretary, do we have any public comment?
If you are in chambers and wish to make a comment, please make your way to the podium and state your name for the record. You will have up to 3 minutes for your comment, and a countdown timer will alert you at the conclusion of that period.
Hi, thank you, Chair, Design Review Board. Janice Carmen, about a year ago, it was in 24, I guess, August. Last year. There was a tree cutting of the whole 2.5 acres was cut, and it took 8 months to get around to telling me that it was a completely illegal project. And since that time, there's been a violation put against me for the curb because they were going to build a subdivision on this illegal project where there were no permits or anything. And the curb was raised. And so the city, the people that I was talking to about the incident at the time actually work in code and zoning. And that person who I was talking to, telling him that these trees were being cut down illegally and it was a horrible environmental disaster, that person signed the letter that gave me a violation for the street and the sidewalk being raised, trying to say it was a violation. But it's not because of that. It's because when the trees were all removed, and this was an old forest, and it was from the Los Guilicos Rancheria, and the ground has imploded. So the street is a mess. They did fix half of their street on that side, but they didn't do any repair of my side. And my driveway has caved in, and it's really bad. And I have told the city about this before, but this is the thing. I've lived in my house for over 40 years, and I was reminded that because I've lived there over 40 years, I should be grandfathered in, and this should not be a headache, a problem, and an ongoing situation for me as a resident and a witness to this disaster. So I'm just going to state that much, but thank you for the opportunity to speak today.
I see no more public comment.
Thank you. I'd like to close public comment. Item 4, board business. Statement of purpose. Item 5.1, statement of purpose. The Design Review and Preservation Board serves as the city's authority on design review and historic cultural preservation. The board is charged with considering the location, design, site plan configuration, and the overall effect of proposed projects upon surrounding properties and the city in general, as well as considering proposed alterations to properties within the city's preservations district and designated landmarks. The board shall compare proposed projects to the general plan, any applicable specific plan, applicable zoning code standards and requirements, consistency of the project within the city's design guidelines, architectural criteria for special areas, the Secretary of the Interior standards for the treatment of historic properties, and other applicable city and state requirements. Item 5.2, board member reports. Are there any board member reports? Thank you. Seeing none. Item 5.3, we have none. Item 6, department reports. Are there any reports from staff?
Yes, thank you, Chair Jones-Carter, members of the board. My name is Jessica Jones. I'm Deputy Director of Planning. I do have one item for you. As the board will recall, this board is relatively new. It's a combination of what used to be our Cultural Heritage Board and Design Review Board. There were final meetings of both of those boards before they were combined into a single board. We have minutes from those last meetings. And unfortunately, in the language that came forward in the zoning code amendments to create this board, we did not create the authority of this new board to adopt the minutes of the prior boards. So at the October 21st, 2025 council meeting, a resolution was adopted by council giving this board authority to approve the final minutes of both the Cultural Heritage Board and the Design Review Board. So I wanted to make you aware of that fact and let you know that at a future meeting, probably the next one, but anyway, a future meeting of this board, we will be bringing those final minutes of those two boards before you for action. And that's all I have.
Thank you. I'd like to open public comment on item 6.
If you are in chambers and wish to make a comment, please make your way to the podium and please state your name for the record. You will have up to 3 minutes for your comment and a countdown timer will alert you at the conclusion of that period. I see no one making their way to the podium.
I'd like to close public comment. Item 7, statement of abstention or recusals. Are there any statements of abstention or recusals from the commission on item 9.1?
Yes, I am going to be recusing myself today from item 9.1 because I spoke against the project at one point in time in front of City Council.
Thank you. Item 9, scheduled items. We are moving on to 9.1, public hearing, Elm Tree Station Design Review, 874 North Wright Road, DR 21-069, presented by Connor McKay, Senior Planner. And at this time, do we have any ex parte disclosures on this item? Thank you.
Sorry to interject. For the ex parte disclosures, if you could each just identify whether you have visited the site or whether you have received any information from members of the public or other sources that is not contained within the materials that you have received and that are available to the public. That would be appreciated. Just one at a time. Thank you.
Sure. I have not received any items that are not otherwise available to the public. And I live in Santa Rosa, so I've driven by the site many a time.
I also haven't had any communications other than what's in our packet. And I am familiar with the site, but I haven't been passed as part of this project as well.
I have not received anything other than what's in the packet, and I have rode my bike by the site many times.
I have visited the site, but I have not received any information that was not otherwise contained in the packet.
I have not received any information that otherwise wasn't available in the packet. And like others, I've ridden my bike by the site, but haven't been there recently.
Connor, would you like to proceed?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair Jones-Carter, members of the board. As mentioned, my name is Connor McKay, and I am presenting the Elm Tree Station design review located at 874 North Wright Road. Before I go into my presentation, I want to speak to some of the comments we've received since the notice was distributed. So when this board was formed, staff created a web page for the board and an associated email distribution group. That would be the drpb@srcity.org email address. When this email address was configured, it was inadvertently configured to be an internal only security, so it could not receive emails from outside of the Santa Rosa network. So if just a member of the public wished to send an email to this email address, it would bounce. And we did receive a report from a member of the public who had that experience. So we did work with our IT department to determine who attempted to send an email to this email address, when they attempted to send that email, and what the contents of those emails were. As a result of this research, we found that 2 members of the public attempted to send an email for a total of 4 emails about this project. This person who brought this to our attention requested the item be continued due to this reason, but staff is proceeding with a recommendation for action tonight. So with that, I will proceed with my presentation. So the project description includes a gas station, which includes 6 pumps and 4 electric vehicle charging stations on 1 lot. There's a general retail space of approximately 3,500 square feet and a 432 square foot building on the 2nd lot. There is a single multifamily residential unit above the retail space on lot 1. And there's also an outdoor park-like amenity space that would be publicly accessible and privately maintained. That outdoor amenity space is connected to an internal circulation connection to the Joe Rodota Trail. And the site plan will be in a few slides. But kind of alongside this project description, I wanted to remind the board that the City Council did approve the conditional use permit and adopted an addendum to initial study mitigated negative declaration that was prepared for the land use of gas station and multifamily residential. The purview of the Design Review and Preservation Board tonight is to review the design review application that is associated with the approved gas station and multifamily residential land uses. As you are all familiar, the project site is located near the western city limit boundary along North Wright Road and connected to the Joe Rodota Trail just south of the 12 and Fulton North Wright intersection. So this project was initially approved by the Planning Commission in 2013. The approved entitlement subsequently expired. So they had to resubmit applications in 2021. The City Council did adopt an ordinance that banned new gas stations in 2022, but part of a provision of that gas station ban was to allow gas stations that are currently in the process to continue through the review process. And there were 2 gas stations in process at that time, and this is one of them. The other one, for your information, withdrew. So as the ordinance currently stands, this would be the final gas station going through the city permitting process. In April of this year, the project was denied by the Planning Commission. The applicant subsequently appealed that decision, and the City Council accepted that appeal and approved the conditional use permit and adopted the addendum to the initial study mitigated negative declaration that was prepared for the project. And that occurred in August of this year. Here is our site plan. So you'll see the larger general retail space kind of towards the north along the Joe Rodota Trail. The second smaller retail space is towards the east of the project site on Lot 2. You'll see the northeastern project boundary has that connection, the bicycle and pedestrian path connection to the Joe Rodota Trail that follows along the eastern project boundary to the south and eventually leads to the sidewalk along North Wright Road. The project site would be accessed from the west, from the patrons of the gas station would access the gas station portion and retail components from the west via North Wright Road. There's also a smaller pedestrian bicycle connection to the Joe Rodota Trail on the northern project boundary adjacent to the parking. The general plan land use designation for the project site is retail and business services. There are some commercial and kind of industrial land uses to the south and the west, and then there is a vacant residentially zoned parcel to the east of Lot 2. The project site is within a planned development district 435. The policy statement allows service stations with the approval of a major conditional use permit. Like I mentioned, the City Council did approve that major conditional use permit in August. The project is subject to the development standards that are established by the policy statement of this planned development district. Where there are standards that are not established by this policy statement, we would use the implementing zoning district of retail and business services, which is general commercial. And the project has been reviewed in compliance with all applicable development standards, and you'll see that in your staff report. The project is also consistent with the zoning code section that regulated service stations at the time that the project application was received. The next few slides are the architectural plans, which are included as attachment 4 in your packet. The architect will be presenting these in greater detail. So I would kind of just flip through them for just your information. This is the larger retail space. And here's the smaller retail space that is on Lot 2 oriented towards the Joe Rodota Trail and the park-like amenity. So as mentioned, the original project that was approved did prepare an initial study mitigated negative declaration for this project. This iteration of the project, an addendum to that ISMND was prepared and included all the mitigation measures from the initially adopted ISMND. And this was adopted in August by council, as mentioned. So we have received a variety of public comments since the noticing was distributed for this project related to the architecture and site layout and design. I've listed the topic areas generally that we've received, but focusing on kind of the design aspects of the project. I know that staff did distribute a memo responding to lots of these comments, but just for everybody's sake, I can summarize some of them. So the project is consistent, as mentioned, with the development standards established by the zoning code and the plan development policy statement. The project has been found to be consistent with design guidelines as outlined in the staff report and the draft resolution of approval. The project is required to be constructed and maintained pursuant to the approved plans. We just did receive another comment at 4:28 p.m. this afternoon with concerns about the color of the buildings and that the project lacks architectural detail that would enhance the scenic entry corridor. The project site is not located within a gateway combining district or a scenic road combining district and is therefore not subject to those development standards or design guidelines. And as mentioned, as outlined in the draft resolution of approval, staff can make all the required findings. With that, it is recommended by the Planning and Economic Development Department that the Design Review and Preservation Board by resolution approve design review for the Elm Tree Station project. And my contact information is on the screen. I know the applicant architect has a presentation, but I'm happy to answer any questions you may have for staff at this time.
I'm sorry, did you say the architect has a presentation? Should we see that before we take questions? Yes.
Um, Trying to get it fuller screen, but it seems to be. View, full screen. Okay, looks like that is what we're gonna get. We can zoom if needed. Let me know when you want me to move the slides. Thank you.
I don't know if this is actually working.
Yes.
Yes, okay, perfect. Good afternoon, I'm Randy Figueredo of Tierney Figueredo Architects. Don McNair, the landscape architect, is also here as well as my client. If there are specific operational questions you wish to answer about the gas station.
Can you speak a little louder? I'm sorry. Or you can raise the table up a little.
Randy, you might need to speak a little closer to the mic.
Okay, is that better? In general, you've probably seen the design concept narrative that was part of the packet, which I think is a pretty good overview of the project. This project has a long history. Since the initial design we did was in 2005 for a larger project. And then this version of the project was essentially designed starting in about 2009. It cycled through the city process. It was actually approved by the Planning Commission in 2013 and by the Design Review Board in 2014. Then we did some extensions to the approval. The approvals expired, which is kind of a long story into itself, but then we came back, did the reapplication, and are back in front of you now with the use permit approved by the city council. The project site's in a commercial and industrial area at the edge of, I believe, what used to be planned for Caltrans as an interchange. I don't know if they actually have that on the books anymore. So it is a very industrial area. It's next to the Blue Star gas facility. It has some construction equipment yards across the street. There's a separate small retail parcel that's part of this project that's to the east of us. And that's been sort of worked out over the years with an agreement with Sonoma County Parks and Rec as an extension of the Joe Rodota Trail, which serves a few functions. One, it allows bicyclists to bypass the gas station and the gas station driveways and connect directly out onto North Wright Road. And we also use it as an opportunity to put in a small retail building, which may be some type of Jamba Juice, yogurt, ice cream, either owned and run by the clients of the gas station or leased out to a separate tenant. We also incorporated trellis and seating areas for bicyclists that, you know, would want to stop there as part of that route. When the station was originally designed in 2009, we sort of conceived it as having service for bicyclists, for electric vehicle charging, and as a standard fueling station, which back in 2009 was, you know, fairly progressive. Now EV charging stations are, you know, fairly commonplace. The main site has the market, which is been conditioned to serve as a neighborhood market, have a wider variety of foods and vegetables and meats than you would normally find in a gas station convenience store. That's about a 3,400 square foot building. And then it also has about a 900 square foot apartment on the second level above the market, which my client intends to potentially use for, you know, an employee of the market. And that would additionally provide some eyes on the site and additional security in the evenings. The southern part of the site has the actual gas station canopies and the EV charging stations in the southeast corner. And then the bioretention is down along the southerly area. Southeast corner retains a large oak tree that's there. The elm tree that was on North Wright Road, which is a large elm tree, which was the genesis of the name of the project, has unfortunately over the last 20 years decayed and died, and the arborist recommended that it be removed. So it has been taken down, and it's being replaced by the landscape architect with an oak tree. Architecturally, maybe if you want to jump onto the color sheets, Connor. I sort of envisioned the building as a kind of a set of interlocking stucco forms with shed roofs surrounding the central section, which was the parapeted flat roof section. There was a screen for the mechanical equipment. The orange is actually a terracotta color, so this is right appearing brighter than it's intended to be. And then the storefront and the sunshades are all a mill finish aluminum. Trying to do a little more contemporary design on that portion of it. And the smaller retail building mimics the larger market in terms of the architectural styling. Again, as I said, you know, this thing's been around for many years. Went through kind of a soap opera of entitlements and extensions and new entitlements. And now has an approved use permit, and we're hoping this can move along through your board. You know, obviously, if you have color suggestions, I'm sure my client would be happy to adjust that after 20 years. And my client and I and Don McNair would all be available for any questions you may have.
You said you have a landscape architect here as well?
Yes.
Oh, would you like to go over the plans for that before we go on?
How do you do? I'm Don McNair from McNair Landscape Architecture. You know, it's a fairly simple site, and it's actually in some ways defined by some of the bioretention that's going on with the project. But in that sense, it's also design features of the site. Primarily, most of the landscape is located between the Joe Rodota Trail and the development itself. There's some small intimate areas. We're using some Quercus, we're adding Quercus lobata to the project, whereas adding some Armstrong maples to the project for some vertical interest. We're using crepe myrtles as a small accent tree. And, you know, it all sort of dovetails with what's going on the Joe Rodota Trail, which, by the way, we worked in conjunction with the county parks on that to come up with a plan. The biggest difference with this plan and previous plans is the addition, as Randy said, of the 48-inch box oak tree, the Quercus lobata, intended to replace the elm tree that has disappeared, went into decline. I think, you know, there's a opportunity here. There's going to be picnic tables. There's going to be places for bicycles to park. So I think there's a good interface between the Joe Rodota Trail and other trails as they move through here, bicycle paths, to be able to use this in a creative way, I think. There's also a lot behind lot number 2, which is just to the right of this, to the east of this project, and that's landscaped accordingly. And it's probably more park-like. There's more trees in there, a lot more going on in that sector. But it's also got some bioretention areas as well. I think that would be pretty much in a nutshell.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
So we're going to take questions from the board to staff and the applicant. Okay. Yes, okay. So before I open public comment, I'd like to remind those in the audience that the board is not considering whether or not to approve the use of the site for a gas station, market, and multifamily residential unit. The decision on the use was approved by the City Council on August 19th, 2025. The action before this board is regarding the design of the buildings and site landscaping. So with that, I'd like to open public comment.
And I'm sorry, Chair, just for I wanted to clarify for the record that we're opening the public hearing.
I'm sorry, thank you. Yes, Pope, thank you. Good catch.
Ready? Thank you, Board. Janice Carmen. I'm just going to make mention of the air pollutants and the fact that they affect the neighborhood. And across the street, it's a proposed subdivision. And the design of the building should be so that and it's also in the San Francisco Basin, and it's been considered a wetland. It sounds like they've had tiger salamanders there. Strange about the oak tree. I don't understand that one. But the toxic air contaminants are more for more vulnerable populations. And the fact that they're going to be selling open things and ice cream and things, children, elderly people are stated in the backup material for the program. And it just seems that it should be set up in a way that those fumes are somehow mitigated and taken into consideration, because they're very serious. And the ones that they're naming are like benzene and ethyl and naphthylene, and they're the non-cancer ones. But then it talks about the sensitive receptors of children under 16, the elderly over 65, athletes and people. And because the bicycles, That's also like an inclusion of people who are, out of breath and, maybe riding their bike hard or something that would be breathing harder as far as the air pollution, the contaminants. And then there's the particulate matter like we get from the fires, which would be also more concentrated. And it takes longer for it to lift out of the basin because it hangs lower, as I understand it. And so I'm just going to say that. And the other thing is that the contaminants usually cause things to age faster and to get to look dirty. So the paint that goes on the building hopefully would be a eco paint and would be a paint that doesn't like reflect the sunlight and has properties that resist the deterioration of the paint. I think that would help if this has to happen.
Thank you. Woody Hastings.
Good evening. My name is Woody Hastings. I live in unincorporated Sonoma County. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I have two main comment categories. One is about process. The other is about a design feature regarding the fuel storage tanks. First, on the process issue, I came in a bit late, but I know that it was discussed that the email address that was provided for folks to submit their public comments was not functioning a few days ago. We don't know how long it was not functioning, but the word went out, even though the analysis showed that there was only one email that was submitted when it was faulty. Lots of people were told that email address is no good, and we've heard from a few that got confused and never sent in their comments. So assuming that there's going to be I know that there's a lot of modification proposals and that this would, come back. I think that would be a good thing so that we can ensure that all the folks that had wanted to submit comments can do that. The other is that my day job is in a statewide policy organization called the Climate Center. And in that job, I track oil and gas industry trends. We're concerned because, and I'm not speaking on behalf of the Climate Center, I'm speaking as an individual, and also I'm the coordinator of the Sonoma County-based coalition opposing new gas stations. The concern is that gasoline sales are in decline, and we're concerned that installing significant fossil fuel infrastructure, underground storage tanks in 2025, when gasoline sales have been in decline since 2016 and they're expected to continue and actually accelerate, sets things up so that we have, that the gas station may close far earlier than planned, and there will be a need far earlier than planned to remove the underground storage tanks and any contamination that comes from that. So we submitted a letter, and it sort of outlines very briefly the option and the industry trend to going with above ground fuel storage tanks, the big propane storage tanks. I presume you've all visited the site and you've seen that the Blue Star Gas propane tanks, huge above ground storage tanks, similar, they'd be much smaller, but above ground, they're easier to keep an eye on, easier to monitor. They don't risk groundwater and soil contamination nearly as much as below ground ones do that all eventually leak, even with the modern technology. Anyway, that's the suggestion for a design change. Thank you.
Thank you. Jenny Blakes.
Good evening. My name is Jenny Blaker, and I've been very involved with the coalition opposing new gas stations for the past few years. I did submit a letter I know that you're supposed to only be looking at aesthetics and design of this project, but my understanding is that you're also allowed to consider the general plan, the zoning, the siting, location, and a few other items as part of what you're looking at. There are numerous conflicts with the general plan. There are zoning concerns about the multiple family housing zoned right next door. There have been questions about the convenience store versus whether it will really be a small neighborhood market or not. And that is an issue with the PD 0435 zoning. And there were questions about having an apartment above a gas station or close to it, and the safety concerns for the person who would be living there. As I mentioned in my letter, it's mentioned in one of these documents that you got to do with design that this would be filling a basic need, but there is no need. There are more than 10 gas stations within 5 miles and 40 of them in Santa Rosa. The local residents that we've heard from have all said they don't need and they don't want a gas station at that site. It's in a wetland. The underground storage tanks would be submerged in winter. We have photographs of the area completely flooded in the wintertime. Even if they were above ground, which might be an improvement perhaps, it's well known that gas tanks leak always, even the newest ones, and that often there are leaks and spills from gas stations, pumps, and all the tubes and valves and so on associated with them. When the MND was approved in 2013, that was a long time ago. There's a lot more known now about the health impacts of gasoline, both in terms of air quality and water quality and contamination, and the amount of sickness that can happen to people who are impacted by water contamination. There are a lot of local residents who are on wells, and they're really concerned about what's going to happen in that area. There was a letter that was submitted to the Planning Commission and the Council, signed by, I think, 20 Sonoma County health professionals objecting to this gas station for those health reasons. The proponents are claiming that this would be a benefit for cyclists. But we had, again, there was a letter that was submitted by 4 different cycling organizations saying no, they don't think it would be an improvement on the Joe Rodota Trail. They're very concerned about safety, conflicts between bicycles and cars, and also the tankers and trucks that would be coming in to refuel the gas tanks. And so,
Excuse me, your time is up. Thank you. Laurel?
Thank you very much. Similar to the previous comments, I'm also very concerned with the underground storage tanks. I live in the area. I live just in the neighborhood just north of the proposed site, and my children go to school at Wright Elementary School, so I'm passed by the proposed site multiple times every day, the school is on well water, so that makes me very nervous as a parent. I really don't want, obviously, there to be oil leaks into the water table that my kids are using. I'm also very concerned with the traffic impacts of this development. Traffic in that intersection is already horrible, just terrible. And if you've ridden bikes in that area, you know that it's really bad during commute hours and not safe. And I'm worried about the bicyclists and pedestrians traveling north-south along Wright Road, Fulton Road. People are not going to take the detour if they're going north-south. They're gonna take the quickest path right in front of those driveways. That makes me very nervous. One way to partially mitigate that would be to prohibit left turns into the parking lot. People going southbound and making a left turn into the parking lot, that's going to potentially back up traffic into the intersection, which is going to make traffic even worse on that stretch, and introduce new conflicts between bicyclists and pedestrians and vehicles. I would also like to request that deliveries not be allowed during peak hours and during times that children are going to and from school. And another big concern of mine is that this site has the potential to become a magnet for the unhoused population. There's already a large unhoused population and population of residents from Sam Jones Hall that congregate in the area. And I've witnessed drug use in the area, and I feel like this project is just going to provide another place for that type of behavior. Speaking of which, there's an area between the back of the building and the fence backing up to the Jordoda Trail that looks like it has a very narrow area with ivy and an ugly chain link fence. And I'd like to request that there be a greater setback. That narrow area is going to attract garbage and other problematic behavior. If there are dumpsters or above ground, sorry.
Thank you.
I'm wondering, is there a way for me to show images overhead?
No,
Okay.
I don't.
Okay, so,
Are there? Well, maybe.
well, just to,
There's a projector thing that may or may not be operating on that podium over here.
all right. Yeah, I don't know if I know how to turn this on. I'll just say I sent an email right before the, 2 minutes before the meeting started that did have some photos. They'll probably appear better there than on this projector anyhow. But I really ask that you look at that because it is in the realm of the color palette and how do those colors stand up to time or don't stand up to time. Since this was approved in 2013. We've had a chance to see how these color scheme look over time and the need for specificity, like it was mentioned before, for what kind of paint and that sort of thing to really ensure that these things are gonna look right. I also in that email addressed, some of the issues where there are claims in staff report of why those colors are gonna work. And you've got photos in the staff report that counter that very thing. But yes, while the land use has been approved for this project, they've left a lot of design decisions to you to make sure that those approvals make sense. For example, it's mixed use between a residence and a fueling. That's allowed. The lawyers of city staff said when they allowed that, it's up to the design to make sure that those are compatible on site, and there's specifications in the code about the design criteria, including that for if there's a residence, you've got to make the design so it does not have negative odors, noise, hours of operation, and other significant impacts. So it's your serious responsibility to make sure that that residence is being designed with that other mixed use. That wasn't something that the city council was looking at. They're like giving it to you to do that. And in the design, they've got the deck facing right towards where the fuels of the little tanks come up. That deck could be facing east. They haven't specified what kind of insulation is that going to have? Is it going to be what R number is the insulation going to be? What materials are going to be used in that residence? What kind of, where's the air intake going to be? What's the HVAC and air filtration? All these concerns are really up to you and need to be done to meet that requirement of a compatibility. There's also the issue of, besides the colors, the placement that's up to you of the tanks. It's also up to you about the placement of the driveways, that site layout, which is now in conflict with PD 0435. And it has increased conflict zones that don't need to be there. You can change that driveway design. There really should be a visual analysis done because this is a significant entry to the city. While it may not meet one characterization, a category of entry corridor, in the staff report, they mention how important of a site it is for the city themselves. There's lighting and there's multiple inconsistencies. The resolution itself says it's for Hansel Ford. There's so many errors in this and inconsistencies. We need more time.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else for public comment? Public hearing comment?
I see no one else.
I'd like to close the public hearing. And now we'll take questions from the board to staff and the presenter. I'm going to start with Drew down here.
Hot seat.
Yes.
Yeah, the hot seat. Okay, I've got a couple design guideline questions. I think it's related to the site and what I think is applicable, and I want to confirm that. So given the location of this site and its adjacency to the Highway 12 corridor, design guideline 4.62A4, which, hang on, sorry. So 4.6 in the design guidelines for the city is city entries and highway corridors, just for anybody who doesn't know. And the goal of this section is to encourage projects to provide a positive image to Santa Rosa to both residents, visitors, and those who may go through Santa Rosa. So within this 4.6.2 is the background, and it establishes it based on a council policy, and it defines the major entries to the city of Santa Rosa. And one of those is West Highway 12 at Fulton Road, which is exactly the intersection that we're talking about. So then under the design guideline portion of this section, which is 4.6.3, for major entries, which is I believe this is considered because there's no other thing adjacent to this property other than the Joe Rodota Trail and the Highway 12 right-of-way. So my understanding would be that in the case of this particular project, under major entries 2, there's supposed to be a setback from the Highway 12 right-of-way of 50 feet. And I'm not sure where that falls within kind of the definition of what's going on, because really the civil engineer hasn't defined the public right-of-way. I don't know where it might be from city engineering for all of that. And so I think, how that interfaces with the actual project site, I think is a question we need answered, because right now I'm seeing 5 feet from the property line. And if the property line adjacent to do you see what I'm asking? I'm trying to find out where the right-of-way starts and ends, and if the 50-foot setback is met or not from Highway 12. So I think that's my first question, and you guys can unpack that, or I don't know if you have an answer.
So I can help with that a little bit. Thank you for that question. So yes, while I do see that is here in our design guidelines, the requirements for setbacks are set in the zoning code in our standards. And those required entry setbacks for entryways and for scenic roads are through the combining districts. And this site is not designated as a combining district, either as a scenic road or a gateway. So it would not be subject to those setback standards.
That's easy. Yeah, it's so weird because I think where the question came in my mind is when you look at the GIS map, right? You're like, oh, well, there's no property between effectively the right-of-way and this property. So you're like,
Except for the Joe Rodota.
except for the trail. Yeah. And the trail is not 50 feet wide or whatever. So it might be. But anyway, that's why I thought I'd ask the question. Okay, so that kind of answers that. So I don't think we had access to the mitigated neg deck, at least in the documents, and maybe I missed it.
Board member, it's attached to the council resolution that adopted that document.
Okay, there it is. Okay, there it is. It was buried, which is why I couldn't find it. But maybe Jessica, you might be able to just answer this for me quickly. Was there a traffic study done as part of the mitigated neg deck? Okay, cool.
Yes, there was a traffic study prepared for the neg deck adopted in 2013, and then there was like an update to that for this iteration of the project. Both included in the ISMND.
Yeah, I guess I was having trouble finding it. Because I thought it might have been like a separate attachment, and I was flipping through stuff and I couldn't find it, so thank
And
you.
just so you're aware, we do have Rob Sprinkle, our traffic engineer, on Zoom and available for any questions, if there's questions about that traffic study.
Yeah, I think I have to read it to ask any questions. Yeah, I'll find it. Okay, and then the last question I had was in the original PD, there is a specific requirement for conditions of approval for architecture. And it says trademark or corporate architectural themes are prohibited. I'm assuming that the applicant doesn't have like an affiliation with, like, I don't know, Chevron or Shell or BP or anything like, so there's no like corporate signage that's going to show up, right? That would be in violation of this condition of the PD. Is that correct? I'm getting nods from the applicant.
That
so-
is, yes, that is,
Okay.
that is correct.
Cool. I think those are all my deep questions about the zoning code. So, and I'm gonna, now that I know where the traffic study is, I'm gonna look at it. Thanks.
Adam, do you have any questions?
No questions at this time.
Drew?
I know that there was a conversation around flooding, and there was a stormwater, report conducted. Does anybody know about, the impacts of the water table and whether that's been addressed in the report and the underground tanks?
Yeah, so I can start and maybe I can ask for some reinforcements here, but specifically about site drainage, the project has been reviewed and conditioned to address drainage. The project is required to be designed to design and construction standards for drainage and storm types of events. Here he comes. Here come the reinforcements.
Perfect.
Hi, Cleve Gurney, Deputy Director of the Engineering Development Services. We reviewed the grading and drainage plans, and there was a SULID stormwater low impact development report that was prepared. And this was also routed to Sonoma Water for their review, and there was no impact to any of the creeks or no risk of flooding in this area per their standards and ours.
And so that sort of covers the above ground, like, water coming from storms or what, what about studies around the water table itself underneath the ground? And I know where.
I believe there was a geotechnical report. I would have to dig into it to see exactly where the groundwater table is.
Hey, that's a great question, Drew. In the MND, it says was prepared in 2012. I mean, that's a substantially outdated geotechnical report. So it's on page.
Yeah, what page is it?
64 of 70 of the City Council Resolution number CC Res 2025-140. It's attachment 9, but it's page 64.
Is the concern of the tanks being close to the groundwater table? Or-
Yeah, just obviously, I think what I'm hearing is answers around flooding as it relates to, like to storms or water, just the existing groundwater table and whether that's been considered, the underground tanks.
Yeah, I believe the underground tanks are designed I believe Mike Johnson or someone from the fire department could speak a little more on the actual design of the tank and the requirements that has to follow in regards to being close to groundwater or being within the groundwater table.
The water table is 7 feet.
I think we have a fire representative here that can maybe speak to the design of the tanks. I don't know if Deputy Chief Lowenthal's on Zoom or if Mr. Mike Johnson wants to come down.
And while he's coming down too, I'd just also like to offer that, yes, that mitigated negative declaration was prepared in 2012-13, but the addendum that was prepared for this project re-examined all of the potential environmental resource areas and had updated studies as necessary. And for water quality impacts, that would be, I believe, page 25, 26. They did traffic, air quality, greenhouse gas. They were all readdressed and analyzed in the addendum.
Good evening, Mike Johnson, Santa Rosa Fire Department, Assistant Fire Marshal. If you had any specific questions on the tank design, as for just being underground and around the water table, they are designed to be placed in those situations. What happens is they get anchored down, and depending on all the geotechnical studies is determines on how well they need to be anchored down and the process that's used. I believe coming next year, there's going to be even more stringent standards on that. So they are designed per their UL listing to be placed underground.
Do you have any more questions, Drew?
Yeah, no, I appreciate just kind of getting our head around this. So looks like, weak and expansive soils were noted in the geotech report. So they're recommending removal, at least the surface soils for the building, and that's a separate design issue, for the building itself. The question maybe none of us have the answer to, but we can just kind of put that out there is whether the expansive soil conditions or the water table impact, the deeper tanks. I don't know, I don't know if you have thoughts on that, but it's
like Assistant City Attorney Crocker mentioned, the initial study mitigated negative declaration that was prepared in 2013 had that geotech study done. The addendum that was prepared for this iteration of the project re-examined all the impact areas and concluded impacts that are below the threshold of significance. The mitigation measure related to which area is it? Mitigation measure requires that the project implement all the recommendations that were made in that geotechnical study as well. So as the addendum concludes and as the city council adopted, the impacts are found to be less than significant.
Roughly how deep are the tanks below ground, roughly?
I am not super familiar. Do you know if there's a standard of?
It's really going to just depend on what's submitted to us, and we'll look at and see that they meet those requirements based on the code and the listing of the tank.
Okay. Another question, seemed like the definition of market, versus convenience store was thank you, sir. Was a key definition. I'm wondering if anybody can speak to that more and explain how the design is oriented around the appropriate definition.
Yeah. So I'll speak to kind of the land use issue and then follow up with the design. Although, like I said, the land use matter has kind of been approved, and that's not necessarily subject to consideration here. But based on what has been provided to us by the applicant, the general retail space on lot 1, approximately 3,500 square feet, is a grocery store / general retail. There are no specific design guidelines that require projects to differentiate between convenience store type uses and grocery store type uses. In terms of classification of land uses, we look at that by the zoning code and consider the land use based on those definitions found in the code. There are no specific design characteristics that projects are required to implement to make that distinction.
And any alcohol related sales or licensing that has any impact on that?
No. They're another land use matter, but I won't get into it. The project does not propose to sell any alcohol or tobacco products at this time.
I just want to remind everybody that we should be focusing on the design because the project has been approved. And so what our purview here today is the design of the site and the building. So just want to remind everybody of that.
All right, getting out of my lane here. Sorry about that. Okay, that's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Chair. And also just to remind everyone that the CEQA document prepared for the project was also approved by the City Council and was not subject to challenge. So all of those environmental determinations stand and are not at issue this evening.
Ingrid.
I want to respect the confirmation that we should not ask any land use questions, but since the board does look at how projects affect sites around it, I am curious if the smaller site where building 2 is acts as a buffer or safety zone between any future development on the residential parcel next to this site.
Yes, so the site adjacent to the east of Lot 2, which is part of the project site, is designated by the general plan for medium density residential. So one could reasonably conclude that at some point in the future, there could be a development proposal for that site. I do not believe that we have received any application of the sort at this time.
I just noticed that in the attachments that were given to us in the packet, there was one sheet from an amendment from a zoning code page. It was attachment 22 that specifically said that residential sites should not be located near gas station sites, but I'm sure that the CEQA analysis addressed that.
Yeah, so at the time this project was received, there was a service station zoning code section, like I mentioned in my presentation, that also prohibited sites with gas stations to be located adjacent to residentially designated or residential uses on a parcel. And the project complies with that standard.
Okay. And then as far as the design, I just wanted a clarification on the pear trees that are indicated on one of the elevations. It's the Retail Market North elevation. Are those trees not part of the landscape plan? They're already there?
I'll defer to Mr. McNair on that question. He should be approaching the podium.
Sorry, I've got to look myself here. So I'm not actually seeing, are you referring to lot 2?
No, this is lot 1, sheet A6. And I see that on the landscape plan, at this elevation of the building, there are oak trees indicated along the bike trail.
Don, if I might interject, it does look like it's on the civil plan that was mentioned as pear trees, but on your plans, you've got oaks, and it's not even on your plant
Yeah, I was
list.
gonna say, I
So I
think-
wonder if it's a remnant of the past 20 years.
I believe that's the case.
Okay,
Yeah, I believe at one point those were Chanticleer pears, but due to disease issues,
Mhm.
not using those too much anymore.
right. That's my,
Yeah. and
Comment.
Those, when I referred earlier to Armstrong maple,
mhm,
that's the form. So
Okay.
15-foot tree diameter by
Mhm.
about 45 feet tall.
all right.
Deciduous tree.
And then another question is on sheet, the color board sheet. Where is color P2 proposed to be used?
I think that's going to be a Randy question. here.
Right.
P2.
Randy, I have the color board slide up on the presentation, if that helps.
Yeah, trying to. I am actually trying to remember. Is the P2 called out on that sheet? Is it called out on the previous sheet at all? Does it just not show up on the elevations? Yeah, I don't know off the top of my head if it's not showing up, if it's not called out. It's just a lighter version of the
Right. Well, just
override.
on the colors, I think you have a nice color palette, especially with the greens of the trees and other foliage proposed for the site. But if you were going to make any changes at all, I would just go deeper on the brown on P1 and lean towards P2 instead of P3.
Okay. Yeah, as I mentioned, the brown is supposed to be a terracotta, so it would be a deeper color than kind of what's showing up on screen.
That's all.
Thank you. I had a question. Did you work with the Bicycle Coalition on this project at all?
Yes, good evening. We did work with the Bicycle Coalition. As a matter of fact, when we first proposed, we had a circuitous path in the rear of the property. But after working with the Bicycle Coalition, they wanted that bypass to the back straight so that people could move at a faster rate of speed. So yes, we did.
Thank you. And I understand the function, building 2, the function is going to be yet to be determined, but you think it's going to be like for snacks and those kinds of things for like,
That, excuse me, that site, the land use on that site is essentially a privately maintained public park, if you will, kind of a rest stop for people along the Joe Rodota Trail or a destination. So there'll be probably some form of snacks or coffee or ice cream, something of that nature. The city code would not allow us to create a parcel that did not have a structure on it.
oh, and is there parking for the apartment?
It's included on the site plan.
Somebody up here is going to show it to me. Okay.
Yeah, it's on sheet A1. It
Okay.
says covered parking for apartment. It's
Okay.
directly adjacent to the trash enclosure.
Thank you.
Yeah, sheet A1.
Does anyone else have any questions?
I did have one more question.
Yes.
So Randy, I'm not seeing any civil plans in the package in terms of drainage runoff, that kind of stuff. I know there's a lot of stuff in Don's documentation about, it looks like the bioswales and whatnot, but I'm not seeing anything akin to, one of the requirements of the design review checklist, which is conceptual grading, drainage, and utilities.
I believe those are submitted to the city. I mean, they should be part of Connor's package. I just don't think they were shown in the presentation. I mean, because this project's gone on for so many years and we actually completed the construction documents and it went through a round of plan checks about 6 years ago. And so now we're actually just updating the construction documents, and the civil drawings have all been updated. So there's a full set of on-site and off-site civil improvement drawings that are completely done, meet all the new bioretention requirements. So it's, the project's actually further along than you would normally see, obviously, in a design review hearing, just because of the way the project progressed.
So Connor, can you confirm that we don't have civil plans as part of what's in Granicus? Or
That is correct.
we don't have civil plans?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
What building code will you guys then be submitting under? This seems. It's,
It was originally submitted under 2016, and now we're going to submit under the 2022. We're looking to submit it before the end of this year.
okay.
Does anyone have any final questions? Go ahead.
I just want to comment that I think that the description of the project as part of as a gateway project is done well by the architecture, and the attempt of the project to be potentially a community resource in the future, a market, and maybe even a place to charge your car if at some point a few decades from now the gas fueling stop is not needed anymore. And so I would just encourage the project to potentially, if the budget is there, push those sustainable building measures, like using cool surface design, concrete on the asphalt, on the surface of the entire project, doing more photovoltaic panels or a green roof, anything like that.
You want to save those comments for that part for your comments section.
Okay, thank you.
Keep those ideas. I'll start with you. How's that?
Well, you just heard it. That's basically how I feel about the project. I think although it was done years ago, the architecture is still very relevant, and it does achieve a nice contemporary vernacular, somewhat related to the rural roots of that area, but also connected to the light industrial uses around it.
Are there any comments?
Excuse me, Chair, too, and sorry, before I don't know if you're going into your final comments and deliberations, but I'd ask if someone would move a resolution.
I'm sorry, say it again.
I'm asking if someone could move a resolution before you go through and do all of your final comments and deliberations.
Okay.
I think what Ashley's asking is, should make a resolution first and then add any conditions and whatnot on top. Yeah. So I'd be more than happy to make a resolution.
Sure.
Let me get to it so I can read it real good. One sec. Okay, I move to deny design review resolution number DRPB RES 2025, whatever the number is here. Doesn't have one. Oh, DR 21069, Elm Street Station, denying design review for the Elm Street Station project located at 874 North Wright Road, assessor parcel number 035-063-001, and 002, file number DR 21-069, PRJ 21-033, and waive the reading of the text.
Well, it needs a second, or we can, go ahead.
If I could just briefly, so the resolution before the board is a resolution of approval. There is not a resolution of denial before you. So we would need to have a motion to adopt the resolution before you. If that vote fails, then the board can make findings for staff that we can bring back of a resolution of denial, if that is your choice, or direction to the applicant to make any changes to the project.
I'll make a move to make.
I withdraw my motion. That doesn't count.
Make a move to a resolution of the Design Review Board and Design Review and Preservation Board of the City of Santa Rosa approving the design review for the Elm Tree Station project located at 874 North Wright Road, assessor's parcel number 035-063-001 and -002, file number DR 21-069, parentheses PRJ.
Can you please hold, ma'am, if you don't be quiet, we're going to ask you to leave. No, you need to stop talking while we are conducting business. Thank you. If there are any more outbursts, I'll ask you to leave. Sorry, Drew. Adam, sorry.
Sure, I'll pick up where I left off. Parentheses PRJ 21-033 end parentheses, and I'll waive the reading of the text.
Would someone like to second the motion?
I second the motion.
And just to weigh in on some parliamentary procedures, thank you for reading the resolution, and now that's on the table. However, as we have talked about in some of our sessions before, you have many options before you that could include substitute motions, motions to amend. So if it is the will of the board to take a different route, there are many options for you to do that. So now you have a motion on the table. You can vote on that motion. You can substitute motion. It's at the direction of the chair really at this point. But now, just for purposes of facilitating conversation, we open the conversation with reading the resolution. And now we have a motion on the table. And with that, you guys can deliberate, you can make changes, you can make amendments. We just have a starting point of the resolution that was prepared by staff and is before you at this time.
Thanks for the clarification, Ashley. And I agree with you. I mean, when you said that, I went, oh yeah, you're right. So hence the withdrawal of the motion I made. Do you mind if I start? Because, I mean, I don't have to, in terms of deliberation and comments. It's up to you.
Yes.
So I just was going to illustrate why I wanted to deny the project. I think the application is incomplete. And so there's a lot of kind of unanswered design questions that should be included as part of the package. And so that's why I wanted to deny the application as it stands right now. So for instance, I mentioned the grading, drainage, and utility plan, and Randy answered the question perfectly well, but it's not part of what we're reviewing tonight. And that should be part of the design review package is grading, drainage, and utility, specifically if we're talking about, a very flat area, as Ingrid mentioned, long-term plans for lighter concrete or maybe, pervious materials, things like that. That really needs to be part of this. There really isn't a great exterior lighting plan to indicate what type of lighting is going to spill from the gas filling canopy, for instance. I mean, there's some diagrammatic information provided, but there really should be a full lighting analysis specifically for a project of this type that's going to be lit up like a Christmas tree, which I think is totally okay for this use, for safety and for, folks coming to the place. Don did a great job with landscape plans, and stormwater plans, which is fantastic. The architectural information is good. And then, so I think there's just a lot of missing pieces to the puzzle. And I'm uncomfortable approving a project that is not complete in terms of the documentation required for this. And I mean, I'm happy to make additional comments if you'd like, but that's why I said deny, because it's just not a complete package.
Board Member Two, just to offer you one of the other many tools in your tool basket. In hearing your comments, just a reminder that there's also the motion to continue to ask the applicant to come back with additional information or to provide additional information in your packets to a date certain or uncertain would be another thing that you all could entertain. Just wanted to remind you of that. There are many different pathways.
Well, let's continue the discussion and see where we go from here, if other people feel the same way or not.
Are we allowed to ask each other questions? So what is there a reason you said you want to deny rather than continue?
I mean, I'm cool with continuing too. I thought denial would be the easier pathway and tell them to come back with a bunch of stuff. But I mean, it's either way.
Why is that easier?
I mean, so I think, well, okay, I'll answer that. So not only do I think the package is incomplete, but I think also the design of the site is incomplete and incompatible with the PD. And I can talk to that more if you want. Okay. So let me get to it. Okay, so the original PD, so what's really interesting about this site, I think, is it's kind of peculiar that 3 non-adjacent parcels were originally included in this PD that was done in 1994. And it's kind of an in vogue thing in the 90s, right? All these PDs that we kind of have all over the city that have these kind of really unique kind of like little overlays. So it was two parcels kind of on the corner of 12 and Wright Road, and then another parcel to the south on the corner of Sebastopol and Wright that were part of this PD. So in the PD, what I think is the current design is not compatible with is driveway approaches shall be minimized. We have Jagundo driveway approaches, right? It's a gas station. Parking lot facilities shall be interconnected among parcels within and where feasible, which that doesn't count. The next one is where feasible, buildings are encouraged to be located along the street frontage with the parking to the rear, which again hasn't been addressed. The building's at the back of the parcel, not the front of the parcel. All the gas station stuff is all the way at the front. I think there's a unique and interesting kind of situation that could happen here with the building up front and the gas station in the back. You could enter off of, kind of wrap around and the building is front facing as opposed to the other way. An architectural uniqueness shall be provided for the district as a whole, including superior design and quality building materials. There is nothing architecturally unique about what is currently proposed. Stucco is not a superior material and will age, gray, get gross with gas fumes, and I would never use stucco on a building like this. So I think there's that. And then there are, however, some interesting architectural features such as pitched roof elements, towers, and a variety of massing. But it's not meeting number 4, it is meeting number 5. And that's why I asked about the trademark, which is number 6. So I think there's just a lot of pieces here that aren't addressed in the original PD, and lest we not even discuss kind of the other stuff in the current design guidelines. So that's why I was thinking denial as well.
Does anyone else have any comments to make?
Looking at me. I have a few comments. I run on the Joe Trail on a regular basis. And so I'm sort of familiar with, I think what, as a community, we want it to be and what it is sometimes, which is we want it to be a great place for exercise that connects the city, connects to Sebastopol, provides some, long runs to ride your bike without stopping, things like that. So I think that's great. And, on my runs, like half of us are kind of using it for that purpose. And then as in the public comments, people noted that unfortunately, it's also used for a lot of folks, the unhoused population, I think was the words used. And that creates issues, that creates safety issues. Like today I went running and I felt unsafe multiple times on my run. It's a challenging, tricky thing. And I think that this project, I really support this project in, improving and going in a direction that improves that and enhances that, because I don't think any given project or any given location on the trail is going to fix it. But what I really want to better understand is how this project becomes a support for the way we want to use the trail rather than not. And particularly just areas in which, frankly, there's like spaces, for people to congregate and things. I think that's important to understand and make sure that we're not creating unsafe spaces. I don't know what that looks like or how that could be further developed in the design. Whether that be, making sure, I think someone mentioned making sure that there's not, frankly, like spaces that are hidden or trash could pile up, things like that. So I don't know, I support this project in the sense that I would love to see it as a connection point and as a development in where we want the trail to go. And if I'm not necessarily decided yet on what option I think we should take, but I'd like to understand and see how this design supported that. Versus I think the risk is it becomes, a place where it doesn't support that.
So the project is approved. So, I mean, the project is approved. Our job is to define what it looks like.
So maybe that comes up in the landscaping then. I don't know what,
If there are
Yeah.
certain areas that you think need to have more, I mean, if you have particular things that you think need to be changed, this is the time to talk about those. But it's going to move forward. I mean, the project is going to happen.
Maybe.
So, I mean,
I'm not done.
yeah, that's
Okay,
great. Go ahead.
So if you have particular things that you want to address, now's the time to bring them up about the design of the project.
Maybe that's an open question then does anybody on the board see that concern or see that the landscaping is supporting what I'm getting at as far as safety or not supporting? So I actually would love to hear from others on that.
We can maybe hear from our resident landscape architect.
There's the plant guy. Sure. Oh, I can get into my comments too. Thanks for that. And yeah, I can address some of the circulation and the connections and neighbor connections that I had been thinking about. Yeah, I'm not very excited about approving a gas station, having a new gas station. That's not necessarily what we need to be having these days, but there are things I am excited about for this project. It's an independent small business. There's a unit of housing involved in this. It's taking a blank slate that is an entrance, but is set back from the entrance of the city. Will be creating a more, it's adding development, but it will be adding more eyes on the street, more activity in terms of safety for Joe Rodota. I actually think that having this gas station on this area, this placement could potentially even slow traffic along the frontage there and potentially help out with the Joe Rodota connection, which each one of those connections is along the Rodota Trail is highly problematic in their own way. There are good solutions that have been done there. I actually think that this potentially could help and provide another outlet for bikers and pedestrians to use the trail. We'll see. I do see that they're partnering with Regional Parks, which is great to be talking with them. And another thing I did see is the inclusion of the city mandated artwork as well, but it's in that upper corner that is the entrance to the back of the site that will be where the entrance to that little coffee shop area, more for pedestrians, more for bikers. So I think that, I'm supportive of this project because I actually feel it's a sensitively and well thought out design for this site. I think it'll be, it's complicated saying that a fuel station will be a neighborhood asset, but it's, there are plenty of uses that either I don't use or I don't like in cities or in areas, but we live in a society and we have all sorts of different uses that are allowed. When it comes down to it, this is an approved use. It's an allowed use for the site, for the zoning. To get to the design itself, I've talked a little bit about the circulation and the site itself. I think that Don has done a great job with bringing in that plant palette that's referencing the Laguna de Santa Rosa plant palette and all of the valley oaks that are there. There's a lot of really essential ecology in this area. I feel like the landscape plan talks to the ecology that's around there. There's a lot of the native plants, the low water use plants. I actually feel that this is going to define that edge along the Joe Rodota Trail. Right now, that section of the Rodota Trail is basically trash strewn kind of roadside, like Highway 12 shoulder. This will actually, you'll have the Highway 12 shoulder, the wide shoulder there, but then on this side, you will actually have a nice fence with hog wire fencing, 4 feet high, open with vines growing on it. And in front of that, diversity of low-growing plant species. Behind that, diversity of multiple layers of plant species that will serve to complement the trees that are already there, and then screen this development, the lights, the buildings from Highway 12 and also from the area. So I think that once at maturity, this landscape is going to will serve to enmesh the site with the local area. I think the inclusion of a small coffee shop, whatever that use could be, is a really great thing. It's nodding to the Rodota Trail and to the users that are there. It's also nodding to that public park, creating more amenity. I think having a grocery store in this area, especially one that's specifically not selling alcohol or tobacco, is great. Never going to vote against adding in a good grocery store, corner store to a neighborhood. The design itself, I feel like, as Ingrid mentioned, this references contemporary architecture that's here. I think that the pitched roofs, the color palette that's here with this, the Blue Star Gas facility next door, I think they're going to complement each other well. We can kind of work our way into the county lands, sort of work on that, get those a little more tightened up. We'll be working on that too. But I think that will define this corner a little bit more. So from a design standpoint, which is what we're here to discuss tonight, I feel that this is it's a well thought out project. It's attempting to respond to the community. It's attempting to respond to the local neighborhood context, and it's fitting in with the zoning. I wish it wasn't a gas station, but onward and into the future, we can hope for fewer of these. One thing I am glad about this is that it sounds like this will be the last approved gas station in the city and in the county. So I will put that in our cap. So those are my thoughts.
Thank you. Ingrid, do you have any comments? Now's the time for comments.
No, I have no further comments. Thank you.
I have a few more thoughts. Thank you, Adam. That was really helpful to kind of understand from a landscape architect the bike part. And a couple other thoughts, taking a step back, I'm a little bit uncomfortable with how long this project has taken. In other words, I know there's things that not everybody likes, and there's gas station, there's issues, but at the same time, if you look at the side, I mean, if you look at the area across the street, it's North Bay Portables, and next door it's Blue Star Gas. And it feels a little unfair to put all of our society's wants and ills on this particular project and prevent it from progressing, when nothing, you know, no project can be perfect. We're not solving, you know, I care deeply about climate, about the environment. You know, this particular gas station isn't, you know, going to make or break that bigger issue that we all need to deal with in our society. So I think it's kind of as a reflection, I think it's a little bit unfair to sort of put too many rules and restrictions on this particular project. The owner is taking responsibility for, you know, what they plan to do. If things change when it comes to gas and electric, then that would be ultimately their thing they'll have to deal with. But for now, I do see it as a community enhancement. I see it as a local significant enhancement of that particular area. I understand there's downsides, but considering the businesses around it, I think this would be a tremendous improvement. And I think it would be, based on Adam's comments, help me understand an improvement on the Redota access itself.
I think I'd like to call a vote on this item.
Board Member Anderson,
I move to approve the item.
Board Member Fagent,
I move to approve.
Board Member Weigel,
No.
Vice Chair Sharon,
Approve.
Chair Jones Carter.
Approve.
Let the record reflect that the motion passes with 4 ayes and 1 nay.
Thank you all for your input and time for this. I just want to say that this item is appealable within 10 calendar days from today. Thank you all for your participation. And I'd like to adjourn the meeting of the Design Review and Preservation Board.